Welcome back to Northern Tales, where stories don't just end, they echo. This is the final chapter of Ladi's journey. A girl once silenced, once exiled, and now standing at the edge of becoming. In a world that tried to tame her, she chose to rise instead. But every fire leaves behind smoke, and sometimes healing means walking through it without losing yourself again. If you followed her this far, through the shame, the storms, and the sugar cane, then you already know. Ladi is not just a girl. She is a lesson, a reckoning, a story that refuses to bow. This is Northern Tales. Every girl deserves to be seen. Every voice deserves to be heard. The talk with her grandfather stirred something in Ladi. Not anger, not shame, but something gentler, something deeper. For the first time in her life, someone did not look at her as a curse or a burden to be tamed. He looked at her and saw a flame not to extinguish but to guide. And when he said she reminded him of her grandmother, the woman he loved more than any other, Ladi felt something tighten in her chest, something warm. Pride. She had never met her grandmother, but everyone in the family knew what she meant to him. The woman who never raised her voice, but made men listen. The woman who never fought with her hands, but whose presence silenced storms. That night, as the village slept and the moon painted streaks across her room, Ladi sat by the window and made a promise. Not loud, not grand, just real. From today, I will fight with words, nothing else. She could still hear her grandfather's voice in her head. Your grandmother never shouted. She never hit. But when she spoke, even kings paid attention. That was the girl Ladi wanted to become, and she was ready to try. This is the beginning of the final chapter. A girl who once fought to survive, now learning to rise with grace. Stay with her. The fire is still burning, but now it's found direction. The news spread like wildfire. The story of the girl who got her school renovated was on everyone's lips. In motor packs, at tea joints, even in the morning announcements at nearby schools. For once, Ladi's name wasn't followed by gossip or shame. It was followed by applause. But at home, her grandfather was watching. Not with pride, but with caution. Don't let this small victory get into your head, he said one evening, stirring his tea like it was truth himself. In this era of social media, people will take your shine and use it for their own gain. He looked at her gently, but with firmness in his eyes. I know you wrote that letter because you wanted a better place to learn, not to chase claps, not to trend. So let it stay like that. Let it remain pure. Ladi nodded slowly. She understood. Several news outlets had called, private radio stations, big city bloggers, even a youth YouTube channel. But in the end, she agreed to speak to just one, the Nigerian Television Authority, Sokoto. Not for fame, not even for herself, but because her principal said the interview could help bring more support to the school. The cameras came. A mic was clipped to her faded uniform. The lights buzzed. And then they asked her the question, why did you write that letter, Ladi? She swallowed hard, looked down at her hands, then straight at the lens. Because I was tired, she said softly. Tired of reading on broken chairs. Tired of watching the ceiling leak on our books. Tired of teachers trying to do their best in a place that had nothing. She paused. I didn't write it because I'm special. I wrote it because I believed someone had something to say. I wrote it because I believed someone had to say something. And I had a pen. The reporter blinked. The camera crew stood still, and for that brief moment, Ladi's voice carried. Not in anger, not in fire, but in truth. And across homes in Sokoto, girls who once thought they had no voice watched her speak and saw themselves. After the interview, everything changed. Ladi, the girl they once whispered about, was now the girl they pointed to with pride. The principal made her head girl, and in every assembly, he told the story of how a single letter, written by a small girl with a big heart, changed the narrative of their school. The government responded. New teachers arrived. Boxes of books were delivered, and 5 shiny computers sat proudly in the dusty old lab, the first the students had ever touched. Amongst the new teachers was Malam Salau, a strict English master with rimmed glasses, an upright spine, and a deep love for the Queen's English. He took a curious liking to Ladi. "How did you learn to speak this well?" he asked one day after class. Ladi smiled shyly. "Books, sir." And Miss Tochi, my NYSC teacher, she used to correct me. Malam Salau nodded slowly, impressed. And from that day on, he made her captain of the new debate club. Every Tuesday and Thursday, Ladi stood in front of the class, arguing for and against strange topics. Traditional marriage versus Western marriage. Books are better than technology. Should children be allowed to discipline parents? The room filled with laughter, with fire, with thought. And Ladi? She thrived. By second term, her team had become a force. And in third term, they swept all 3 rounds of the local government debate competition. For the first time ever, their little school was going to the state level. Her grandfather was overjoyed. But when he heard the competition would be held in Sokoto City, he refused to let her go alone. He called Indo's brother, the dye merchant. Arrangements were made. The uncle's driver arrived, and together, Kaka and Ladi went to the city. Every day of the competition, Kaka sat in the crowd. He didn't understand English, but whenever Ladi walked on stage, he clapped the loudest. Sometimes he clapped too early, standing up while the MC was still reading names, but nobody minded. By the second day, everyone in the hall knew Kaka. And some whispered, "That's the girl's grandfather, the one who raised her." In the end, Ladi's school came 5th. Not the trophy, but something even bigger. They were the only public school to reach that stage. And when the Commissioner of Education rose to give his final speech, he looked at Ladi's team and smiled. Any student from this school who gains admission into a Nigerian university, he said, will receive a full scholarship from this ministry. The hall erupted. Ladi's classmates hugged her. Her principal wept. And Kaka, he didn't speak. He just looked at Ladi and saw his late wife standing tall in her granddaughter's eyes. He had once feared her fire. Now he was warmed by it. The girl who once threw stones had now built a path. The rest of the secondary school became something magical for Ladi. After the debate, something shifted, not just in the village, but inside the school itself. For the first time, the teachers believed. They held a long staff meeting, one that stretched deep into the evening. And it was Malam Salau who stood, glasses pushed high on his nose, voice steady, like a man delivering history. "You heard the commissioner," he said. "This is our moment. In all the years this school has existed, not a single student has cleared their SSCE papers. Not one has scored up to 200 in JAMB. But that can change, starting now." Heads nodded. Chalk dust filled the air. That night, the teachers made a pact to rewrite the legacy of their school. A guidance counselor was appointed, Miss Moji, an NYC teacher from Oyo State with soft eyes and a firm voice. She was tasked with helping SS3 students discover their paths. One dusty Wednesday afternoon under the neem tree behind the staff room, Ladi sat across from her. "So," Miss Moji asked, flipping open her notebook, "what do you want to become?" Ladi blinked. Nobody had ever asked her that before. She liked books. She liked reading, but become something? She had never imagined she had that choice. Miss Moji smiled and softened the question. Okay then, what makes you happy in your academics? Ladi's face lit up. Debate, she said. I love arguments. I love that everyone gets a turn to talk, that you can say what is in your heart and nobody's allowed to interrupt you. She leaned in, voice rising. I like that people have to listen to me, that I can speak and not be silenced. Miss Mochi leaned back and smiled. You've just described the job of a lawyer. Ladi paused. And then something like clarity passed through her eyes. She nodded, slowly. Yes, she whispered. I think so too. I want to be a lawyer. The months leading up to the exams felt like a long determined march. At school, the air shifted, heavier, focused, hungry. Teachers stopped joking. Students sat straighter. Even the dusty classroom walls seemed to lean in and listen. Malam Salau arrived every morning with bundles of past questions neatly wrapped in rubber bands and smelling faintly of old ink and hope. This, he would say, are your stepping stones. Lend your rhythm, master their music. And they did. Day after day, hour after hour, the students practiced like their futures depended on it. Because maybe for the first time, they did. On long school days that stretched into the evenings, Kaka would quietly appear, standing at the edge of the school compound with a warm flask and a folded mat. He'd sit beside Ladi as she ate, shielding her plate from dust with his hand. At home, his wife Zainab teased him endlessly. Here's your lunch for your new wife, she'll say with a wink, handing him the food. Make sure she likes it. Let her not come and shake my position in this house. He'd chuckle, sometimes tapping her playfully with the back of his hand. You better serve her well, he'd say, before she snatches this old man from you. But the truth sat deeper than the jokes. His love for Ladi had grown roots, deeper and stronger than he had ever expected. He had many children, many grandchildren. But this was something else. A protectiveness that pulled at his chest like a string. A quiet ache whenever she looked tired. A silent pride when she smiled without fear. And often he found himself staring, not at her face, but at her presence. Because though Ladi looked nothing like her late grandmother, who had been small and delicate, while Ladi was tall, broad-shouldered, and already towering over him, the essence was the same. The fire, the stillness, the way she tilted her head when curious, the way she refused to back down with grace, and most of all, the way her silence now carried more power than her rage ever did. It baffled him, it comforted him, and on some nights, as he lay on his mat staring at the ceiling, he would whisper her late grandmother's name. You're still here, in this girl, and smile, because somehow love had come back home. When the exam results came in, the school buzzed like a beehive at dawn. For the first time in its entire history, more than half the students passed all their SSC papers, and more than 2/3 gained admission into university. Ladi passed, not the overall best, no, but the best in English literature and history. Her name, typed clean and bold, stood tall on the board. On graduation day, the air was thick with pride and perfume. Mothers ululated. Fathers nodded with rare softness. And then the principal called her name. Ladi. The girl who once beat up a village wrestler. The girl who once ran from shame. The girl who wrote a letter that changed everything. She walked up to the stage in her worn-out sandals, borrowed gele slightly crooked, but her back straight. The principal's voice cracked as he spoke. This young woman rewrote the story of our school. She reminded us what courage can do even when it is written in biro. In the crowd, her grandfather sat quietly, her grandmother beside him, and her uncle translating word for word. Kaka wiped his eyes. He didn't bother to hide his tears. That night, a ram was slaughtered. Not for Eid, not for a wedding, but for Ladi. Invitations were sent to her parents. 2 days later, her mother's message came. Your father says he wants nothing to do with this celebration. He has forbidden me from coming. Kaka hid the message, but Ladi overheard her uncles talking. Maybe it's shame, one said. Maybe fear. Let's not judge him. Ladi stood still for a moment, waiting for the pain, waiting for that familiar sting of rejection, but nothing came. No tears, no ache, just this quiet warmth truth. She was loved. In the last 3 years, her grandparents had shown her a tenderness she never knew existed. That love, not the trophies, not the applause, was her greatest gift. And the blessings kept coming. A senator from the neighboring village had sent her a check, 500,000 naira. And then the admission letter arrived. Law, Usman Danfodio University, Sokoto. She held the paper to her chest, felt the ink melt into her skin, and in that moment, she didn't see the girl who was exiled. She didn't see the fighter, the girl who once threw stones and bled pride. She saw a girl who found her voice and used it, who rode her way out of shame and into purpose. Ladi entered university with Kaka in tow. It became a running joke in the family. Her uncles would laugh and say, Kaka, if care is not taken, you will follow her to her husband's house too. He helped with everything. Registration, photocopies, even arguing about her hostel room. Let her stay in the house, he insisted. But her uncle gently pulled him aside. Baba, he said, you have to let her grow. So he let her go, but not too far. Her uncle bought her a new phone and said, you can call her every day now. And Kaka took that advice literally. Every morning after prayers, the call came. How are you, Ladi? What did you learn today? She'll tell him everything. The lectures, the mock trials, the professors. He barely understood a word, but he listened anyway. University felt like freedom. Ladi fitting like a missing piece. The old Ladi still rose sometimes, the fighter, the flarer, but always she remembered. If you can't fight it with your mouth, walk away. Her voice matured, and in mock court, she never lost a single case. See, Kaka will say during their morning call, you don't have to be loud to be heard. One day he said, I'm happy you're using your God-given talent. What talent? Ladi asked. He chuckled. Your talent for fighting, for arguing, for being opinionated. She started to protest. See, he said, laughing. Even now you're arguing. They both laughed. By the end of her first year, Ladi was the best student. By 300 level, she was inducted as an honorary member of the International Federation of Female Lawyers, Sokoto State Chapter. There, she found something even deeper, her calling. Helping girls like her, misjudged, misunderstood, silenced for being too much. When she graduated, the state government offered her a position, not just as a lawyer, but as an advocate. And at every event, every outreach, every room full of girls, Ladi would rise, tall and sure, and say, I'm not saying every girl must go to school, but every girl has a voice. Find yours. Nurture it. You don't have to be loud. My wise grandfather always said, if you can't use your voice to fight, then it's not worth the fight. And in the crowd, girls would sit taller. Some would smile, some would tear up, and some would finally begin to listen to their own fire. Because Ladi The wild girl from Sokoto had become a voice that no one could silence. Not anymore. Not ever again. Thank you for journeying with us. This was Ladi's story. A girl once called too wild to be loved, who became the voice that changed the world. Subscribe to Northern Tales for more soul deep stories. Every girl deserves to be seen. Every girl deserves to be heard.